Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Microsoft Today podcast. Today's podcast is being recorded on Sunday, February 24th, 2019. And today we're going to be covering Microsoft's Mobile World Congress 2019 live event, which included announcements for the new HoloLens 2 mixed reality device and the Azure Kinect IoT Edge device. We had a tremendous time covering Microsoft's live event earlier today as we watched Microsoft unveil their new technologies and initiatives. We also hit a huge milestone today on Twitter. I'm thrilled to announce that we have surpassed the 5,000 Twitter follower mark. We've more than doubled our number of followers since the podcast started just 6 weeks ago. It's been truly amazing ride. My only regret is not starting this endeavor sooner. It has been a blast thus far, and interacting with the thousands and thousands of listeners and technologists has been amazing. We can't wait to see where we go from here, and we hope we hit 10,000 just as quickly as we hit 5,000. And with your help, we certainly can. And so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It really has been a wild ride, and I can't wait to get up every day and see just how much you guys are passionate about technology. As a thank you to the community for hitting this 5,000 Twitter follower mark, I'll be releasing 2 bonus podcasts this week. I've already begun recording them, so I know that they'll be done this week. They'll probably be in the 15 to 20 minute range, and they aren't necessarily focused on technology, so but look forward to that. As a thank you to you, I will be releasing at least 2 more podcasts this week. I'm trying for 3, but we'll see how that goes. And I'll kind of discuss what's holding me up later in this podcast. But for now, let's dive into the amazingly awesome announcements that Microsoft made today at Mobile World Congress Barcelona. And whatever you do, please stick around to the end of the episode, because at the end of the episode, I'll be giving some community kudos. So kudos to a couple of folks in the community that I came across this week, and also a new ad from Microsoft that literally just came out as I was recording this episode that I think is worth talking about. So stick around to the end of the episode to hear that. Today was a busy day in Barcelona for Microsoft as they announced more than 10 new products or initiatives spanning the mixed reality, cloud services, hardware services, business development, and other spectrum. For full details about all of the products and services they announced, check out the blog post at msft.today. It'll be in the show notes that lists everything they announced. Well, we're going to dive into the bigger announcements right now. Something that may have been lost in all of the hardware news was Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella starting off the event by discussing a fundamental shift in the company's philosophy.
Putting people at the center instead of the device. For years, we have built applications and experiences specifically for given devices. But interaction model going forward is with computers and computing all around us. It's no longer about being device first. It's about putting the human first, and it includes all the devices in their lives. Together, these advances are shaping that next phase of innovation, enabling experiences that previously would have been unimaginable and technological breakthroughs that have been impossible. That's the world in front of us. This opportunity is what grounds us in our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
He then goes on to say that Microsoft's success lies in the success of their partners and customers.
Our success lies in the success of our partners and customers and our ecosystem. This requires that we collectively move from being just passive consumers of technology to active producers of technology. We create technology so our customers can build their own technology. And this is imperative that's becoming even more important. Today, every company is a tech company, and every organization will need to build its own digital capability to compete, to grow, and to prosper. The next big tech breakthrough, the next advancement that will transform our lives will come not just from another technology company, but from a retailer or a healthcare provider or an auto manufacturer. For organizations, that means we must be their trusted partner, empowering them to build their own digital capability. Not to be dependent on Microsoft, but to become independent with Microsoft.
As I was watching the event, it really struck me how their message falls very much in line with why I started this podcast and why I've discussed the topics that we've discussed so far. The future is coming. And you can no longer be passive. You must be proactive and learn to adapt and utilize the technology that is there, regardless of your role in a workplace. Just like all companies are going to be technology companies, all citizens at some level are going to become technology citizens. And while that may take 20 years to happen. It's going to happen. Your children or your children's children, everybody's going to need to know the basics of computer science, and they're going to need to know the basics of how systems work. Just because technology, especially with IoT or Internet of Things, is going to be in everything we have. We have smart dishwashers, and we have smart washer and dryers, and we have smart refrigerators. Now we're going to have everything is going to have a microprocessor in it and be connected to the internet and be able to provide you with data to improve your life. That's just where we're heading. It's good to know that Microsoft's making that cultural shift now to focus on the user and what they think is important rather than the devices. And it really makes a lot of sense that they've made that transition from a closed garden to an open garden. We're going to get to that further in this podcast, but they made that shift. Basically, when Satya took over as CEO, Windows Azure changed to Microsoft Azure, and that's because they knew it was going to host a heck of a lot more than Windows. What he's saying here is basically, we're going to cater to whatever the needs are of our customers, and we want them to create technologies that sometimes even compete with us because it just drives the technology faster and farther, and that just helps us all. They'll continue to adapt and find their role in whatever that future is. And it's really strange that Microsoft is the company that seems to be leading the way, when in the past, from 20 years ago, they were looked as the big evil person. Now they're the ones thinking different, and they're the ones doing no evil, to steal from Google and Apple. So it was just an awesome event, and hearing Satya talk about it, I just kind of wanted to dive into that because that's literally why I started this podcast. Very much what they're saying. And again, we'll touch base on that whenever we hear from Alex Kipman later. And before we dive into the HoloLens 2 announcement, I want to touch on some terminology. So basically in the past, people have referred to HoloLens as augmented reality, and Microsoft has really made it a point to use the term mixed reality. And for those that don't know the difference between mixed reality and augmented reality, it's the environment. When I say environment, I don't mean like Mother Nature. I mean the environment in which you're using that mixed reality device. The environment becomes part of the experience because the mixed reality can overlay on top of the environment. So the holograms you're using can overlay on top of the real world that's surrounding you. Whether it's Minecraft blocks sitting on top of a desk, they'll appear to physically interact with the desk itself. So if you drop a block, it'll stop when it hits the desk. It won't just continue to go through the desk. And so augmented reality takes away that aspect of it. Augmented reality is really just the computer and the human, where mixed reality adds that third environmental variable. And so just picture a Venn diagram where you have three circles, one human, one computer, and one environment. And they overlap. And where they overlap, the little slice right in the middle where they overlap is mixed reality. And if you check the show notes, I do have the mixed reality Venn diagram within the show notes, and I link to Microsoft definition of mixed reality. And so if you want to dive into that, I literally just spent a long time saying something that probably could be summed up in one sentence. Augmented reality is the device and the human, where mixed reality is the device, the human, and the surrounding environment. And my apologies if that sounds overly complicated. That it was not my goal, obviously, but I think it is important to make that clarification as we go over HoloLens and its uses. Microsoft has made it a point with HoloLens 2 that its interactivity with your environment is a huge upgrade that's part of the HoloLens 2 over the HoloLens 1. No longer is it really just objects floating in the air. Now it's objects you can interact with, not only with yourself, but also your surrounding environment. So you can take a 3D piston and put it into a physical motor that is sitting in front of you from a training perspective. And so enough with me blabbering on about trying to explain mixed reality to you. Let's just get to the devices. And so HoloLens 2 is obviously the big story of the Mobile World Congress for Microsoft. And the HoloLens 2 team focused on three key areas when redesigning the new hardware from the ground up. They literally started from scratch as far as the hardware goes. Obviously, they built upon the things that they learned with the first HoloLens, and much of the same technology was used internally with the HoloLens. Pretty much everything is new and improved. The three key areas that they focused on were immersion, comfort, and time to value. And they say immersion is greatly enhanced by advancements across the board, including the visual display system, which makes holograms even more vibrant and realistic. They also said the field of view for HoloLens 2 has more than doubled. If you use the original HoloLens, and it was amazing, but at the same time, the field of view, so where you could actually see holograms, was actually fairly narrow. It seemed like you didn't even really have to turn your head to see holograms. And now, you don't quite have 180 degrees, but it is getting closer. So not everything within your field of view can have a hologram on it, but it's more than doubled for the HoloLens 2. They put in a new display system that excels at lower power, so that should allow for it to work longer hours, which is really important whenever you think about field uses. And we're going to talk about that in an actual episode of focusing on specifically the HoloLens 2. This right now, we're just going to go over the high-level bullet points, just because there's so much information to go over. But there's in the construction world, they're using these HoloLenses to, see how a building's going to look in a few days or a few weeks. And the longer that they're in the field, the longer they need that battery to last. And so it's good to know that they've also worked on making it more efficient. They also said the eye tracking sensors make interacting with holograms more natural. There was some eye tracking sensors within the original HoloLens, but I don't think they were actually being used like these eye tracking are being used for the holograms. So with the eye tracking software, as you move, the hologram should adjust how it's displayed to you. So hologram's a 3D object. And so whenever you walk from left to right, your view of that hologram should change based upon your field of view and your perspective from where you're viewing it. So it's cool to know that that's out there. They've improved. And just think from a perspective with the eye tracking software is the folks who are with disabilities. And we kind of discussed that in a previous podcast. Just think of the people who use services in the eye tracking from the old Kinects, to track their eyes, and that's how they type. Steve Gleason or anyone with ALS who lose the physical ability, but they thrive with their cognitive ability. Just think of the eye tracking and how that should be able to empower people who are working with limited capabilities physically. And then, so the final thing with the immersion is they've added Windows Hello with iris recognition. And so iris recognition is the best single sign-on recognition you can have. It's scanning the iris of your eye, which there are no two alike. And you can't copy the iris of an eye like you can copy a fingerprint. So they've added iris in Windows Hello. So as soon as you put it on, it logs you in immediately. They said most of the time whenever they put it on, it recognizes them before they even actually have a chance to slide, because it tilts now before it slide it down in front of your eyes. So that's really, really awesome. Comfort was the second area where they said they wanted to improve tremendously. They said comfort is enhanced by a more balanced center of gravity, the use of light carbon fiber materials, and a new mechanism for donning the device without readjusting. So basically, they've made it where it fits better on the head. The first one was kind of front heavy, and it looks like they've counterbalanced it now. So there's an area in the back. There's a in the back that seems to counterbalance the weight within the front. And then using carbon fiber obviously is going to drop the weight tremendously. Even though they were using polycarbonate plastics before, which aren't too heavy, carbon fiber is just a different beast. They can use much, much less material, which makes it lighter overall. Plus, carbon fiber is lighter than composite plastics anyways. And I would like to say, and I pointed out on Twitter, and people totally agreed, I got a lot of interactions with this, it was clear from the presentation that HoloLens 2 is much less cumbersome than the predecessor. And the demo wearers looked comfortable wearing it. And so kudos to the hardware team that helped them achieve that. And Julia Schwartz specifically, she was the one in the red shirt that was out there doing the demos. She was doing some really cool stuff and looked like she was just having fun doing it. And of course, wouldn't you if you had a HoloLens on? It just looked way, way different than the last time that they demoed the original HoloLens, 4 years ago. It just seemed, that one was still obviously, whenever they demoed it, I think it was still wired, but they were talking about having it wireless. And so it's just crazy how much smaller it's going to get. And so just think the next iteration within the next 4 years, it's going to be eyeglass size almost. That's just how we do it. That's Moore's Law, right? And so the third and final key area they wanted to have for HoloLens 2 was time to value. And this was a huge issue with the first one, right? Because it was a completely new device within a completely new device segment. And so people had to build things from the ground up. And so Microsoft says it accelerated by their mixed reality applications like Dynamics 365 Remote Access, Dynamics 365 Layout, and the new Dynamics 365 Guides applications. And so they've built these enterprise-ready Dynamics 365 applications that are ready for HoloLens now. And of course, they've been developing those for 4 years as they built the original HoloLens. And so obviously with HoloLens 2, they'll be able to adapt it for that as well. Not only that, they've said that there is a business-ready ecosystem of mixed reality partners that provide a broad range of offerings built on HoloLens that deliver value across a range of industries and use cases. And again, where the businesses are is where the technology is going to go. Just think of the business use cases for that. There's the medical industry where they can literally make a 3D CAT scan of someone's body, or just anything like that. Construction, just think of all the business uses for this device. Now think of how much money those businesses already spend on software, and so why wouldn't you as an entrepreneur want to enter that space? And that's where they said the biggest new wave is there's mixed reality entrepreneurs kickstarting new ideas all the time right now. And so the HoloLens 2 will be available this year, so sometime within 2019, at a price of $3,500. And then bundles including Dynamics 365 Remote Assist, start at $125 a month. I believe the enterprise bundle was $5,000. And HoloLens 2 will be initially available in the United States, Japan, China, Germany, Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Australia, and New Zealand. So if you're in one of those countries and you have $3,500 to spare, customers can pre-order HoloLens 2 starting today. Obviously, the price point is extremely high still, and Microsoft even increased the price point probably by adding better technology to the devices as they built HoloLens 2. Generally, lots of times you'll see the second generation drop in price of new hardware, but they knew that that baseline hardware wasn't where it needed to be, so they went with carbon fiber. So they made it more efficient with the battery. So they used 2K displays for each eye. Kudos to them sticking to their guns, knowing what the vision of HoloLens is for the long term, because they know that the businesses who this is going to help the most, $3,500 is nothing to a hospital. It's nothing to a construction company who has a $200 million building they're building. I work on a $35 billion road contract in my day job for the state of Texas. $3,500 in the grand scheme of that could save and help plan and help envision what's happening down the road for this 10-year project, that's nothing. For an average consumer, that's a ton of money. We're still 3 to 5 years away from this being a consumer-ready device, but even then, that's going to be early adopter paying $1,200 for a cell phone type, folks. Most people are going to be in the $400 or $500 range, and then maybe they'll get it. Because just look at like HTC Vive. That's not really catching on as much as people thought it was going to be from a virtual reality perspective. It's going to, but then you need a beefy computer for it. And you need, all these other things. So just remember that. I know some people look at it and they're like, why would they price it at $3,500? Just remember this is a business line device right now. The consumer uses are going to come, and they're going to come. Like, one of the original things they showed whenever they announced the first HoloLens 4 years ago was playing Minecraft with your kids on a tabletop. Remember in the first Star Wars when Chewie is playing with the chess set that's little holograms out there fighting? That's coming, and I can't wait for that type of technology. It's going to come at a price right now. And so most consumers are going to wait 3 to 5 years until it gets there. But even then, the big thing is, will the developers come? And that's what kind of killed Kinect. And that leads us to the second announcement yesterday, which was quite a surprising announcement for many. It wasn't for me, and that's because I've long been a Kinect fanboy. For many years, people who thought Kinect was stupid and gimmicky were only looking at it from the Xbox perspective. And I completely understand why Microsoft made the decision to release Kinect on the Xbox. And that was to get it in people's homes, to get metrics, to get data, to get in as many homes as possible. If you tie it to a gaming device, then you could do some cool things with it. Unfortunately, developers, again, didn't really buy into it. And then also it affected the performances of the Xboxes themselves. And so they just decided to kind of kill it from that perspective. And people thought that was the end of Kinect. And I don't know how anyone, especially from the technology media, and they were on The Verge, and it was on Engadget, and it was Gizmodo. I'm like, what the heck are these people smoking? There were so many industrial cases where people were hacking Kinects to do just these amazing things. Everything from the original Xbox 360 Kinect, then the Xbox One Kinect. And now if you go try to buy an Xbox One Kinect on like eBay, you know how much that costs you? It costs you way more than it originally cost you, because these people are hacking them. They're programming and doing all this other shit and tinkering in their garages, with this technology. And now they're going to be able to do that with a $399 device. And so Azure Kinect is here. And so basically they've taken the technology that was part of Kinect and they put it in a smaller package, and it's meant for IoT uses, so Internet of Things. So it'll be in places where you can't be, but you want eyes. And not only that, the depth perception and the camera, the infrared camera does all these other things that you can actually see things. And one of the demos they had for the Azure Kinect was monitoring patients in a hospital. So sometimes patients get out of their bed in the hospital to go use the restroom or to get something to drink. And like they said in the presentation, they say that 1 million hospital patients fall in their hospital rooms each year in the United States alone. That's a lot. There's 330 million people in the United States. 1 in 330 people fall in their hospital room. Just think. So they have these Azure Kinects in the hospital room, and not only are they monitoring people, they're building it with AI, and so they can predict when someone may fall. The software and the AI are looking and saying, oh, that patient's legs are a little shakier than the average American, so that person may be falling, and they alert the nurse, and the nurse goes and helps them. Think from an agricultural perspective. You're monitoring things, and the camera's so good on that. I'm betting they can even pull soil data, and they can pull things like how much water's in soil just by looking at the color. I don't know. I'm just spitballing and throwing out ideas here, but those cameras on those original Kinects were so powerful that's why you go try to buy a Kinect on eBay right now, you're probably going to pay 2 or 3 times the original cost. Now that there's the Azure Kinect for $399, people are going to be doing some really amazing things with that. I do remember watching people who, again, with disabilities, they had hacked a Kinect to basically autonomously drive their wheelchair for them. So they have an automated wheelchair, and they had a Kinect on the front and a Kinect on the back. They put in their destination, and the thing just drives and just knows not to hit anything based off the cameras. And so these technologies with IoT is just going to be fascinating what people do with it. I kind of went down a rabbit hole there without actually reading the bullet points of the Azure Kinect, and so let's dive into that. The Kinect lives, as I just said, and is now more powerful than ever. The Azure Kinect DK, as they've called it, or developer kit, is a developer kit that combines Microsoft's industry-leading AI sensors in a single device. And at its core, the Azure Kinect is the same time-of-flight depth sensor that was developed for the HoloLens 2. So the depth sensor that, like, how you interact with the objects around you in your environment, what makes it mixed reality, that depth sensor, so the computer and the AI and the software know how far something is from you and maintains that is built into the Azure Kinect. So don't just think of the Azure Kinect as a static device. Maybe it's sitting on the front of an 18-wheeler. Maybe it will automatically stop for you. Autonomous driving, that's coming, right? Maybe the technology within the Azure Kinect can do that for many other areas. The second bullet point for it is it has a high-def RGB camera, and then it has a 7-microphone circular array. So we've talked about Microsoft Research's Soundscape, which gives basically vision to people who are blind based upon sounds. And imagine, I don't know, putting that together with an Azure Kinect that has a 7-way microphone array. Just the possibilities. I mean, they're literally the possibilities are endless. And you kind of see where they're going with this, right? Like, they know that if you have eyes and ears, which at Azure Kinect is that, and it's that to a T. It has eyes and ears. You can put those eyes and ears, as they say, at IoT Edge, or the edge of the cloud. Wherever the edges of the world, you can have an IoT device there. And that's what the Azure Kinect is supposed to be. And I can't even think of like the hackathons that are going to happen with the Azure Kinect. And I'm so happy that the Kinect is still around. I wish it would have been adopted more from a gaming perspective, and then I could still have it. But I do still love my Xbox One Kinect. I still use it, even though I upgraded to an Xbox One S. So I got the little cable for free to convert it to plug it into my Xbox One S. And so I still control my TV with Cortana. And so I love the Kinect. I still do. And it's just awesome to know that the Kinect lives on. And Microsoft says the new hardware will enable development of advanced computer vision and speech solutions with Azure. The Azure Kinect DK is initially available in the US and China, and is available for pre-order today at $399. That's interesting that the currently is only available in US and China. It's interesting that they chose China over Europe. I mean, it makes complete sense because nobody manufactures more than China, and nobody's trying to automate more than China. It's interesting that's US and China only. So sorry if you're not in the US or China, the Azure Kinect SDK is not available for pre-order. I am going to pre-order one of these. I'm not a developer by trade, but I just have to get involved with it, and it looks just really cool. It looks like a cool little device. I use Arlo Home. So Arlo is a Netgear wireless cameras to monitor my house. And I can just imagine like something like that. Maybe I can use the Kinect to monitor my dogs, and whenever my dogs are, when I'm not home, I can talk to my dogs and stuff like that. So, with home automation, all of these little IoT devices are going to be really, really, really cool. And so I'm not going to dive too deep into Azure Kinect just because they didn't really dive very deep into it. I have looked at the documentation, which is much, much, much deeper. So we're going to have a whole, just like with the HoloLens 2, we're going to have a dedicated, within the next week or two, we're going to have a dedicated episode just for Azure Kinect. Well, Azure Kinect and IoT, Azure IoT. Since I had kind of a weird transition between the Azure Kinect and the HoloLens, let's just back it up a step and talk about one more thing with the HoloLens. So Microsoft also announced the Microsoft HoloLens customization program. And they say HoloLens is being used in a variety of challenging environments, from construction sites and operating rooms to the International Space Station. HoloLens has passed the basic impact test from several protective eye standards used in North America and Europe. So they're talking about using HoloLens in industrial and or unsafe areas. And so they're adapting it to make it customizable for the usage scenario. So they brought out one partner who showed what they've been working on, Trimble. And so Trimble last year has made software that connects to a HoloLens where they're a construction software company, so you could see a building being built in front of you. Construction worker put on and say, that's what it's supposed to look like. Okay, cool. And so they built a hard hat that has a HoloLens built into it. And that is the Trimble XR10 with Microsoft HoloLens 2. Again, whenever we have this HoloLens episode, I'll dive into that more, but it's just really cool to see that there was more than one application for the HoloLens and that they're open to utilizing any form factor. I just always go back to the people with disabilities and or limitations that they have special use cases. Think of the HoloLens. I think it's safe to say that now you can think of the HoloLens as the Xbox adaptive controller. It's a platform where you can plug in all, with the Xbox adaptive controller. It's a flat controller that has 27 different connections or whatever it is, where you can plug in whatever connection works best for you. And I think that's going to be the case with the HoloLens. It's, I made a comment on Twitter that, is it modular? I don't know yet, because the Trimble XR10 looks like a really well-developed product. So they designed it from the ground up. It looks a little bit different than the HoloLens, but it could just be modular, right? So you have the body frame, but the brains are the same and the cameras are the same and the sensors are the same. Can you just change the modular system? That's what I'm interested in finding out. But it's great to see that they're thinking about that way, because again, the usages for this, wherever there's two eyes, you should be able to use this to improve your life and or work somehow. On the Gulf Coast, it's a really big and dangerous job here, underwater welders. So imagine like an underwater welder being able to practice in a low, in a swimming pool, what they go out and do in the deep ocean. Just spitballing ideas. But the cool thing is that this is going to be, a fighter pilot, like an airline pilot or a fighter pilot or a helicopter pilot. Anyone who relies on their eyes for a living could probably utilize this tool to better train them for their job. And so it's cool to see that maybe will be a modular platform, and it'll be, HoloLens 2 seems to be like, Satya said it in the original, we're making the baseline, then people make stuff on top of that, and that's okay. For them to be successful, their customers must be successful, and Microsoft will adapt as needed to keep pace. It's cool to know that they're not limiting HoloLens just because of what they think their vision is. And that's where design thinking comes in. So design thinking is a methodology, and you have to be empathetic to you have to be empathetic to your customers. You need to understand why they need it the way they need it, whether you agree with they need it that way or not. Empathy is a really hard thing for me because I'm a very logic-based person. I'm like, 1 + 1 = 2, no matter how many times you need to say 3. It's cool to see that they're using that same sort of methodology with this. And so, sorry I spent a little bit more time with that, but whenever I just think deep about these things, and it's cool to see that they're just the way they've evolved over the last 10 years. They're so much more thoughtful in everything they do. As someone who was burned by Windows Phone and was burned by all these other platforms that they built that they thought was great. Zune. Yeah. Hey, Zune. And then they just abandon. You can see that they don't want to abandon these products, so they're making them adaptable. I think that's the point of this. The HoloLens is going to survive because the business is going to determine where the HoloLens goes. Does that make sense? I think at the end of the day, the last 5-minute ramble, that could have been summed up. The HoloLens is going to survive because someone's going to find a use case for this, even if the masses don't. And so that brings us up to the next thing within the presentation, and that was open principles. And so Alex Kipman came back out on stage, and for those that don't know, Alex Kipman is the father of the HoloLens. He is the technical fellow. He is one of the most brilliant people in the world. And he came out and made sure that they wanted to show that they're sticking with what they said, that Satya said at the start. They want to empower people regardless of whether they're using their products or someone else's product. Microsoft believes that for an ecosystem to truly thrive, there should be no barriers to innovation or customer choice. Again, empathy. Microsoft wants the mixed reality space to transition from a walled garden to a communal garden. Is this the same company we're even talking about? Communal garden? Like, holy crap, this is amazing. Like, that's just, I really wish I was in the initial executive leadership meetings where these radical ideas came up, and you see the old guard kind of like, what the hell are you talking about? We're going to do what? We're going to open source what? We're going to give what away? And then having the guts to do that, because the backlash for that, making that decision and it failing, there's no coming back from that. At least not from a career perspective. The company may survive, but the board of directors would have fired Satya Nadella had this never worked. I know he didn't make this decision himself and own these decisions himself, but the leadership at Microsoft who's made these decisions to go open, they need to be praised. Because especially as we see companies like Facebook and Google and Apple doing the opposite. I got on a tangent there, but the open principles. So their mixed reality ecosystem will be open, and they gave 3 core commitments for this. They're going to have an open app store, which means developers will have the freedom to not only make their own apps, but make their own stores. So there will be multiple mixed reality stores. And you think about that, why would you do that? But you have industry catered mixed reality stores, right? So, we go to an electronics store and we want electronics, right? Some people, you can go to Walmart and get electronics, but you're not going to have the whole selection that you'll have at like a Fry's or a Micro Center or a Best Buy. So it's important to have that, to have options. And then open web browsing is the second core commitment. So Microsoft says that yes, Edge will be supported, but they won't stop anyone from trying to take part in that web browsing experience. And so much so, they announced that Firefox will have a native web browsing experience on HoloLens at launch. So you will be able to use Firefox and or Edge whenever you can use a HoloLens too. And then finally, open platform. They have an open API surface area and driver model, including further guidance with OpenXR. So they're saying, we're going to guide you towards OpenXR, which is the framework and platform that they think things should go. But if you can make it work on HoloLens, you can obviously make it work on HoloLens. But they'll always keep their API surface area available, and they'll ensure that the driver model will always be open. So people won't be able to do something really cool and then not share it with anyone else, because it'll all be a common driver model and it'll all be a common API surface area. How you build it is kind of up to you. It's no different than choosing a different language, right? Whether you want C# or whether you want Ruby on Rails or anything like that. So it's cool to know that they're going to be an open platform. And that just kind of falls in line with everything they've been doing. I would bet that within a couple of years, Windows won't even be the number one use for Azure. It's just really cool to see them coming out from the get-go. And I think this is where they failed with Kinect, is because they didn't say these types of things whenever they announced Kinect. They said, this is what Kinect is. It will work with Xbox and PC. And here's a baseline development kit for it. But they didn't really say you can really do whatever you want. You don't even want. That's the cool thing about this. HoloLens is powered by Windows 10 holographic, but at the end of the day, you can do pretty much whatever you want on Windows, right? You can run Linux on Windows now. So there are no limits, and they're not trying to limit you. And so go out there, go create. Here's a pen, here's a piece of paper, draw your masterpiece. And moving on from the open principles, we can talk about the other services basically that they announced. And that was Dynamic 365 Guides. And Dynamic 365 Guides is a new mixed reality app that empowers employers to learn by doing. And so the way they sell it is the time to bring someone up to speed on how to do something. Just think of people doing a physical job, whether they're making something or they're doing something with their hands, in a manufacturing space. Or there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And it's hard the only way they really get it is by repetition. But whenever you're doing things repetitious by putting things together, it can be costly if they fail or mess something up, or you have limited supply, so you have to build it and then take it apart and then build it and take it apart and build it. It helps you virtualize that assembly experience. Just imagine someone putting together a car, someone sitting on the assembly line at Tesla, and they need to know how to put the seat in exactly. Instead of picking up the seat every single time and practicing, picking up a 60-pound seat over and over and over, they can just pick up a hologram and practice it over and over and over, and they can see right where the seat goes and right how the seat's supposed to be connected. And they can just do that till however many times it takes them to get it. There's no cost really for that other than time, but it's the time savings as well. And in the videos with this, it's actually cool because it's kind of like a drag and drop system. It's kind of like creating a training video that you would do with PowerPoint or things like that for just basic office training, but now it's this 3D world where you can create these immersive things, and it's just really, really cool to see. And so they say Guides enhances learning with step-by-step instructions that guide employees with the tools and parts they need and how to use them in the real-world work situations. In addition to the Guides on HoloLens, a Guides PC app makes it easy to create the interactive content by attaching photos and videos, import 3D models, and to customize the training by turning the institutional knowledge into a repeatable learning tool. That's the big thing of repeatable. Just think of the I Love Lucy episode, for anybody old enough to remember I Love Lucy, but whenever they're working the chocolate line, right? They put them in front of this chocolate line that's running faster and faster and faster before training them about how to just get that rhythm down, right? Next and the final thing they really announced was the Azure Mixed Reality Services, which is funny because I just talked about this a couple episodes ago when we were talking about Crackdown 3. Azure Compute Offloading. Repeat it. Azure Compute Offloading. It is the future. That's how IoT is going to work. That's how you're going to get 4K virtual reality on your Xbox. That's how, you're not really going to need computers anymore. Everything you're going to do is going to be in the cloud. You just need an internet connection. And so Azure Mixed Reality Services, they built HoloLens from the ground up to be Azure connected. just like they did Windows Server 2012 way back in the day. That was the first cloud-first operating system. And so they built HoloLens in mind to use Azure from the get-go. And they say, keeping true to Microsoft's long-standing charge under CTO Satya Nadella's cloud-first vision, Microsoft announced more services for their Azure cloud platform. Today, they announced 2 new Azure mixed reality services. These services are designed to help every developer and every business build cross-platform, contextual, and enterprise-grade mixed reality applications. Those mixed reality services are Azure Spatial Anchors and Azure Remote Rendering. Azure Spatial Anchors enables businesses and developers to create mixed reality apps that map, designate, and recall precise points of interest that are accessible across HoloLens, iOS, and Android devices. And Azure Spatial Anchors is in public preview starting today. Next, they announced Azure Remote Rendering. Azure Remote Rendering helps people experience 3D without compromise to fuel better, faster decisions. Today, to interact with high-quality 3D models on mobile devices and mixed reality headsets, you often need to decimate or simply 3D models to run on target hardware. And so basically, all the compute and all the number crunching happens in the cloud, and all you're really seeing is the display. So back in the 80s, when you would, there were terminals. And so that's where we're heading, and that's where Azure is going. And it's good to know that the Azure Remote Rendering is there, because that means that you're going to get lower cost of entry devices as well. While the HoloLens is $3,500, if you can get a wired headset that focuses on basically getting the inputs right, so getting the sensors and getting the displays right, you can get a wired headset that does Azure compute offloading that doesn't need a heavy CPU lifting or heavy memory usage, then you can get that cost of entry down really, really, really low, especially from a development perspective. If a developer doesn't need a cordless wireless thing that the person in the field would need, they just need the basics to get the understanding of how their app that they're building works. And so just know that Azure Remote Rendering is big. It's because it's going to get more people into the space that aren't even going to be using HoloLens. They're going to be using whatever augmented reality or mixed reality device that they want, but they could still utilize the Azure Remote Rendering. And that goes back to the open platform. All right, so that pretty much handles everything that Microsoft announced and or displayed. And like I said, we're going to dive deeper into a lot of these, what they discussed in future episodes. They're going to be more standalone for whatever they are. So look for those in the next couple weeks. But before we do, I just wanted to give high praise to the Microsoft Mobile World Congress presenters. So Satya Nadella, Julia White, Alex Kipman, Julia Schwartz were the Microsoft employees that were there. I have a full list of the people from Spatial, Mattel, Trimble, PTC, Howden, and Epic Games within the show notes. But it was a really great presentation, and it was just so much more interesting than the first one. I think it was a lot easier to understand for the layman what they were trying to accomplish, because really at the end of the day, I think is because they have 4 years to develop tools that were actually usable. Whenever they first announced it, it was more gimmicky stuff, it was like proof of concept things, where this is like real working products that people are using every single day with HoloLens, which to me is a good sign for the ecosystem. They're continuing to make progress every day, and more people are buying into the ecosystem as well. So I, for one, think the future is very, very bright for HoloLens. And so now we're going to move on we have some community kudos, and then we're going to talk about that new Common commercial at the very end. But please give me a couple minutes right now. We have huge plans for the future of this podcast, and my daily interactions with all of you makes me more steadfast in that resolve by each day. I truly am blessed and humbled by the reception you've all given the podcast so far. I can't wait for us to have more journeys down this rabbit hole of knowledge together. To maximize my time and yours, I need financial assistance to create the podcast I think Microsoft, their technologies, employees, fans, and enthusiasts deserve. So far, I've bootstrapped everything myself, including every aspect of the show, social media, the website, and support, which has been a massive yet rewarding experience. But for what is right now a non-paying hobby, it is untenable. There simply aren't enough hours in the day for me to produce the content I think you all deserve, while also maintaining a full-time job. So I need help. Enter Patreon. Patreon is a way that you can monetarily support the podcast with small donations each month. And I've created tiers within Patreon, which if you want to know more about the Patreon setup and the tiers, that's the very first episode of this podcast. So you go back to the January 1st episode. So I won't bore you with that here, but Patreon is probably the easiest way to help support the podcast. However, if you don't have the time, money, or inclination for Patreon, that's okay. We also have an Amazon affiliate link. So if you go to msft.today, on the right side of the page, there are 2 links. The first one, become a patron. That takes you to our Patreon. So if you'd like to see what we have to offer at Patreon, please check that out. Below that is support Microsoft today by shopping at Amazon. So we have an Amazon affiliate account set up. So whenever you shop at Amazon, if you go through our affiliate link, we'll get a 2 or 3% of whatever you purchase if those purchases are part of their affiliate program. And the best part is that it has no real cost to you. So please just consider that. You can actually get to our Amazon affiliate page by going to https://msft.link/Amazon. So that's msft.link/Amazon. My goal is to produce far more content than we are producing right now. Right now, I'm doing a lot of things on the back end with the website and with the podcast editing and the social media. So all the money I make from these things will go back into the podcast. The biggest thing is editing. I would love to hire a podcast editor. They're about $40 to $50 per episode. And most of the services range in the $500 to $1,000 a month, depending on the number of episodes you have. So that's my first goal, is to make enough each episode so that I can hire an editor. Because editing the podcast takes longer than it does to record the podcast. So logically, every time I can pay someone to edit the podcast, that's another episode that I can record during that same time. So that's my fundraising goal. There are just so many awesome topics to talk about. As an example, I currently have more than 12 episodes in development. I'm doing research for them at the moment, building out my show notes from 12 different episodes that I could probably record within a day or so. And then I have more than 20 ideas brainstormed at the moment. And if you'd like access to these show notes as I'm building them, all patrons have access to the MSFT Today OneNote, where I track all of these things. So my goal is for the patrons who are part of this to help kind of guide where we go with future episodes. So please just consider supporting us on Patreon, and you can do that at patreon.com/MSFT today, or if you can go to msft.today and just click the Become a Patron link on the right side of the page. And if you'd like a sneak peek of the episodes that are currently in working progress, I'm going to put a screenshot of the OneNote page in the show notes for anyone who'd like to see it. So you kind of see what you would be signing up for if you become a patron. And while I hate asking for money, I think the show deserves it because I think you guys deserve it. And at the end of the day, anything that can help me produce more content that you guys can enjoy and give me feedback on, that's definitely something that I'm going to pursue. But enough of that, let's get back to the good stuff. Thanks again for taking a minute to listen to that. It is something I'm going to continue to do until we can get an editor. So I appreciate any feedback or any help that you could give us. Until then, it's time for Community Kudos. So Community Kudos is something I want to try to do every episode if I can, but if not every couple of episodes. And basically it's just calling out people within the community that I interact with or that interact with me or with the MSFT Today Twitter that, I think deserves a little spotlight on them. So Community Kudos. First and foremost, thanks to everyone for all of your support and interaction. You guys really do make this enjoyable. I'm trying to build a community here more than just a podcast. And if you just like the podcast and only want to listen to the podcast, that's great. But we really do have a super passionate people on Twitter, especially right now. And I'm trying to build some websites out to build a community too, especially like a learning portal. And that's going to take some time and dedication from far more than just myself. And so I just want to start early and give the kudos to the folks I think who deserve it within that same space. And so these two people are people that I just decided to shine a little light on today. And so Nuno do Carmo, sorry if I'm butchering your name, buddy. Nuno space D-O space C-A-R-M-O, Nuno do Carmo. I'm from Texas. We can't really do names past Bob. But he showed us some love on Twitter this week, which was really great. Anytime someone does give us a little love on Twitter, I get a little emotional, man. It's really cool. No, it's just good to know that, all the hard work is paying off and that people are enjoying it and that I'm not crazy thinking that this is something that people want to listen to. And he also, as he gave us kudos, requested some stuff. He asked that we would cover Linux on Windows and whether that was WS Linux or W Linux. And so I have a call out to anyone out there who is a Windows on Linux expert or a Bash lover on Windows. I have definitely wanted to cover Linux on Windows or just open source in general on Windows. And as I told Nuno on Twitter, I definitely want to cover open source initiatives and things like Linux and Bash on Windows, Azure, etc. I just don't want to do a disservice to those technologies and the people that make it by being wrong. And so if I don't know very much about something, I'm probably not going to. That's why you may not hear me talk about Linux very often. I am a Windows man through and through. I grew up on Windows Server. So I'd like to make sure I'm well versed in something before speaking on it. And Linux is easily one of my weakest areas. So with that said, if anyone has any advice on how to get up to speed on Windows on Linux, or if there are any SMEs, subject matter experts, or MVPs out there who want to take part in an episode, I'd love to have someone on to talk about Linux. And again, you can see all the links, and I put some tweets and stuff in the show notes. Obviously, this is a huge area for Microsoft, so it should be a huge area for this podcast to focus on. Microsoft came out and they said, we love open source, and we're going to pass back the open source initiative, being a platinum partner. And so I think we definitely need to cover that here, because we're not just Windows guys and gals anymore. And that's just the future of technology to begin with. We are going to be OS agnostic. It's all cloud. It's all going to be service-based. It's all going to be no-code applications. And it's, the platform really, really, really doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of it. And that's where we're going forward. And so I definitely want to have some Linux-based conversation here, mainly because I want to be able to learn from you guys who know Linux. So I want to get people on here who can win people to the cause of using Linux on Windows, rather than me just putting my foot in my mouth and making Linux sound stupid when it's really just me being stupid. Call to action. Any SMEs out there or MVPs out there, hit us up at MSFT Today on Twitter, or at BradGuru on Twitter, or you can send us an email, contact@msft.today. And if you have any ideas that you think for the show, feel free to reach out. Not just about Windows on Linux. We're always and constantly looking to have people on. And if you're someone who's technology related, whether you work for Microsoft, or whether you work for one of their partners, or whether you work for any kind of thing, if you have something you want to talk about that you think is interesting, reach out, because I am definitely looking for people to get involved and to share information. And literally, I know people are doing some really great things out there, and I want to share whatever you're doing with our community, as long as it falls in line with basically being technology related, innovation related, and education related. I think are our three main. I haven't written that down anywhere, but I think that's our three main areas of focus. And so with that said, this is something that I just stumbled upon on Twitter, because I browse hashtags all day. And so Vivek Bavishi, sorry again if I'm butchering that name, Vivek Bavishi, Vivek Bavishi. I saw one of his tweets. So he says, and I actually retweeted him saying on the MSFT Today Twitter, so we keep saying it, the Power Platform community is amazing. And so Power Platform is what I do in my day-to-day job right now. So I'm 100% invested in that on my day-to-day job. And so I'm sorry if sometimes the information skews that way, but that's what I see the most of. But he says, nothing impossible for a power addict. I combine the power of Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft To Do, and voila, here's a teaser trailer. He built a Microsoft To Do app. It's kind of hard to explain what he did, but just check out the show notes. But basically, he created a whole calendar app and To Do app that does all this other stuff that's automated and connected to Flow and the Power Apps. He created a Power Apps that looks like the Microsoft To Do list. That's not really the Microsoft To Do list. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that he did it. Like, when you look at the screenshot, you go, that's not To Do, or that's not, like, nope, that's a Power App. That, kudos, my friend. Like, really, really, really impressed with what you did there. Wow. Really, really great thing. So that's just awesome. If you guys see things that are really, really cool that someone's done in the technology space that you think should be shouted out and give community kudos, tag me. We can make it happen. I really do like the community kudos, because I just think it's important. There's just so much cool stuff people are doing. And I'd even expand it to maybe a whole episode, maybe like once a month, do a community kudos episode. I don't know. You guys give me feedback. Let me know. We're kind of growing this and just kind of seeing where the hell it goes. But right now, I think that having community kudos pretty much every episode is going to be a normal thing. And it's same thing for comments. If you guys have comments or questions you want to ask, I already have one I'm making a show on. It's going to be one of the bonus episodes. Remember, I'm making 2 bonus episodes because we hit 5,000 Twitter followers. So that's going to be there. So we're about to close. But before we do, we're going to play, literally when I started recording this podcast, Microsoft on their YouTube channel published a new commercial. But I had to play it because it's extremely, extremely important to me to play this. And so I'm going to play it right now. Just know that it is a commercial, so it kicks in really quickly. So there's no real easy way for me to transition to that. Just know it's going to start in 3, 2, 1.
Today, faster than ever, the world is changing because opportunity is raging. Mixed reality, changing the world we see. Intelligence to build it like we always hoped it would be. But it's not really about what technology can do. It's about how it's used by you. In the end, it's just a tool, so bring it. What's a hammer without a person to swing it? Your possibility is endless, your limits are few. So here's the real question. What will you do?
So there it is. It's just a 30-second spot. I noticed it as I was recording, and whenever I heard it, it really, really hit home for me. Especially the line, what's a hammer without a person to swing it? Your possibility is endless. Your limits are few. That really hits me like right in the feels, because that is the purpose of Microsoft Today in a nutshell. Like Microsoft, I want to empower you all to be the best you, because we're here together on this pale blue dot, so we might as well make the best of it. And I can't be the best me unless you're the best you. It's symbiotic, right? So we're all here together, and so the better I am, the better you are, the better we all are. And so that's the purpose of this. And these Common commercials, they just get me, man. Like, whoever writes those, I don't know if Common helps them write them, but to me, that 30-second commercial summed up their over 1 hour presentation yesterday. It was the same thing. We build the hammer, you need to swing it. But how you swing it is kind of up to you. And your possibilities are endless, and your limits are few. So just think about that. Let me know what you think, or if I'm just being silly, but I for whatever reason, that just really struck me, and I thought it was a great commercial. So, and again, the actual video for this is in the show notes, so if you want to see the actual video, it's there. I think it's also on Microsoft's main YouTube channel. I think that's where I got it. And that's it. That episode is much longer than I thought a quick overview episode was going to be. I was like, I'm just going to go over the bullet points, and that's it. We'll have the deep dive later on, but still, I had a great time, guys. I hope you did as well. As I like to do every week, I would just ask you for one thing. If you enjoy Microsoft Today, if you want to see and hear more of Microsoft Today, I ask that you please tell at least one person to subscribe to Microsoft Today. So find one person in your life who you think would enjoy the conversation about technology and innovation and education, and please just let them know about Microsoft Today. And if the thousands of our listeners did that, and they did that every week, we'd grow really, really quickly, and I'd have all the resources I would ever need to do things like hire editors and the like. So I appreciate everybody. I can't believe how much this has grown over the first 6 weeks. Without you guys, this is nothing, so thank you so very much. And look forward to your 2 bonus episodes. Look for your 2 bonus episodes on Monday, February 25th, and Tuesday, February 26th. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way he's going to have those out. I've already started recording. That's the secret. That's the secret. I'm always angry. Sorry, a little Avengers talk there. Until next time, guys, spiral out. Keep going.
From Milan,